first few slides you always recognize. So once again, for those in the room and those on Zoom, thank you for being with us tonight. So as always, I've been saying this for over a year now. We hope you enjoy yourselves tonight. We hope you learned something interesting tonight. I think you will. I've been talking to Chris, our speaker, and he sounds like he's got some fun stuff for us. I hope you make a new friend tonight. So hopefully you've introduced yourself, maybe one new person. And I hope you are reconnecting with old friends tonight. There's one thing nice is over the last 2 years, I think we've become much more social as a group. And that's actually, I think everybody's enjoying that. So I'm glad to see that. If you haven't already done so, please put your cell phones on stun. I actually remembered to do mine before the meeting tonight. So that was progress on my part. All right, and any visitors, any first-time visitors tonight that would like to introduce yourselves? So we're going to give you a mic because we do have people out on Zoom and they can't hear you introduce yourself without a mic in your hand. So keep your hands up and there's a mic coming to you. So anyway, please.
Hi, my name's Steve Chucker, and been looking at your websites for a while. Recently got a telescope and just kind of looking for somebody to get involved with, you know, to go out and have some fun, do some stargazing. I have found in Gilbert, stargazing's not great.
Yeah.
So
just a wee bit of light pollution.
Little bit of light pollution. So anyway, just kind of wanted to kind of get a lay of the land, and you know, I'm still thinking about joining.
If you do a 180, there's a guy right behind you named James, and he organizes a lot of verbs observing out at our picket post site. So
Okay.
you want to talk to James before you leave tonight. Anyway, who else is new? Would like to introduce yourselves? We've got a hand over on the edge over there, it looks like.
Hi, I'm Patrick Garrity. I discovered you guys on Facebook and looked at your website, and I have a huge interest in astronomy. 40 years ago in Milwaukee, I was a member of the Milwaukee Astronomical Society when I was like 15. I'll fast forward to 58, and I'm still interested in astronomy. So I'm going to see how this goes.
Okay, well, welcome. We're glad to have you here tonight. Anybody else? That's two, so I saw two hands. Oh, one on the back table there, and Amanda.
Hi, I'm Haley. I'm Brooks's granddaughter, and I'm just here visiting and trying to drop in and see, you know, spy on you. So,
Okay. Well, welcome, Haley. So, all right. Anybody else? I think I saw just the three hands. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Then, thank you for being here tonight. All right, tonight's agenda, we got quite a bit going on tonight. So we have just general announcements. We'll have Alice come up and talk about our public outreach for the last month. I'm going to recap some special events and announce some special things coming up as well. I'll have one slide about our 2026 budget, and just so it's transparent, you know where we are, you know where our budget is. It's just one quick slide I'll talk about. So, and we just do that at the end of every year. We'll have some elections tonight, so we're going to elect some new board members and some new officers as well. That should be fairly quick. We do have one member presentation tonight, Merill Jencks. There you are over there. Anyway, he's going to be talk to us a little bit about the Celestron Origin Astrograph. It's one of our new telescopes we purchased in the last few few months, I should say, for our rental pool, and he was one of the first renters, and he's going to talk about his experiences using the Celestron Origin Astrograph. And then I'm kind of questioning whether we're going to have time to do it, but I was thinking about trying something a little different tonight, running a little bit of a game show. But with the elections and everything else, we might run out of time. So if we don't do it tonight, we'll push it into January, and we'll do it into January instead. Then we'll have our seventh inning stretch for 10 minutes or so and have our break. And then we'll have our primary speaker, Chris Ford, come up and talk to us about the secret history of Hollywood and astronomy. So I was talking with him once again a little bit before the meeting. It sounds very, very interesting. So anyway, we should have a lot of fun here tonight. General announcements, I'll go through these quickly because I do it every week. So if you're a regular, you've seen these a dozen times at this point. So if you are a joiner, or are you a joiner? If so, then you should join the club. we're kind of at the end of the year, but you can join anytime. But obviously, our next meeting won't be till January. We do not meet next December. So no December meeting, don't show up, we won't be here. We don't do that because they do that riparian after dark where they light up the whole park area over here with Christmas lights and people walk through it for I think 11 or 12 nights over there. So it's a big thing. So no meeting in December. So our next one will be January. Definitely you want to think about joining in January. If you want to know what's happening here at EVAC, you can actually subscribe to our mailing list. What that does, that means as things are happening, we typically send out a couple of emails a month, 2, 3, 4 emails a month, 6 probably at the most with meeting announcements and stuff. But it just keeps you informed of what's going on without having to go out and look for the information. It just shows up in your inbox a few times a month. Also, then you can also manually figure out what's going on by going to our website and just clicking on the events and meetings tab, and it'll have a calendar there showing everything that's going to happen as well. You can also sign up and get our newsletter. So we have a newsletter. It comes out at the beginning of every month. If you join the email distribution list, you're automatically going to get the newsletter. But if you don't want to do that, you can always go out to our website and pull down any newsletter you want. In fact, there's newsletters going back 20, 30 years out there. So you can see a lot of what's going on. Also, you can join our Facebook page if you haven't already done so. There's probably around 1,200 people on that Facebook page right now. It's just various announcements of various types, just like you know how Facebook works. And the nice thing about Facebook is that you can post to that. So these email aliases are kind of locked down where only board members and officers can send something out via the email list. But for Facebook, you can post anything. So, hey, is anybody going to pick a post? Or I'm going to pick a post? Or hey, I got a telescope I'm selling or a mount I'm selling. Whatever, it's your Facebook page. You can kind of use it to your advantage. If you need a telescope or training on how to use a telescope, we have online training on our website as well. You can also buy or rent telescopes off of our website. And so notice we have a used equipment for sale. We also have a equipment for rent as well. The equipment for sale is usually at least around half price typically. And Tom Jacobs is our property manager. And I saw Tom earlier. Oh, there he is. Okay. And he picks these things up from people that want to donate or whatever and checks them out and tries to make sure they're running pretty well and are functional. And then he sells them, and we take the proceeds from that to help support the club. So, and it turns out that the reselling telescopes is about 1/3 of our budget. So it's very important. We also have equipment for rent, and we have everything from, fairly low end, inexpensive push-to scopes all the way to that Celestron Origin Astrograph, and we have a C8. We have a C-Star out there, so lots of stuff you can rent. So if you want to try something before you would buy it on your own, you can rent it for very inexpensive and try it out and then say, oh, I like this one. I think I'll buy it for myself. So anyway, nice thing to do. If you want training, once again, we have all these virtual labs here. We also, a couple of times a year, run hands-on classes. James, you're about halfway through one right now? Oh, one more class. Okay, so yeah, James has been doing one on the basic telescope operation, and that's lecture and lab. So he does lectures via Zoom, so you don't have to leave your house. And then we have hands-on labs out here in the park or out at picket posts or somewhere reasonably nearby. I'm sure that we won't run a class now for a few months because we just ran one, but once demand picks up a little bit, we'll be running more classes, or James will be running more classes. All right, this is just a FYI, so if you want to copy down that website, you can, but I was actually contacted a few weeks ago by a PhD student in Paris. She is looking for people to just help study awe and astronomy. And so if you can look at the text there on the slide, essentially it's just you fill out a form and give your opinions and your reactions to certain things. She says it takes about 10 minutes to complete. And then you go into a pool and you could win a $35 gift card at space.com or the space.store. store. So anyway, and they group everybody up in groups of 50. So out of every 50, there's at least one winner. So anyway, so there's the website. If you'd like to get a picture of that or whatever and participate in that, feel free to do so. If you didn't get the picture, see me on the break or after the meeting, and I'll bring this slide back up again, and you can grab the URL at that time. So anyway, Alice, you're on. Not fast enough, faster. So, okay.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alice Kloeb, and I'm the club's events coordinator. And I get asked a lot when I tell people, hey, you should join our club. They go, well, what do you do? What's the benefit of joining the club? Of course, I'm going to say it's giving back. So our club has two ways that we share our love of astronomy and give back to the community. And our first one is literally just down the sidewalk over here. It is Greco. So that is Gilbert's Rotary Centennial Observatory, Greco. It is open every Friday, Saturday night from sundown till 9:30. Open to the public. We, as club members, manage it and operate it. Obviously, we're not open tonight because I see Claude in the back. Claude is our manager. But if you're interested in volunteering, you can either talk to Claude tonight, and those of you who are on Zoom, you can see at the very bottom, it says email observatory manager at. Shoot him an email, let him know you're interested, and he'll be happy to talk to you about volunteering. All right. On to me. This is my jam right here. We give back by having star parties for public venues, schools, libraries, HOAs, community centers. What do we do with these? Well, basically, we share our love of astronomy with these guests by either bringing your own telescope, having an object in mind of what you want to view, and share that with the public as they come up to view. Or just as important as having a telescope is you could be what we call a walker or a helper. And this person goes around and keeps an eye on guests, reminds them of telescope etiquette, maybe helps keep the lines short, so there's not a huge line behind one astronomer, lets them know there's other places to view. Maybe they also check in on the astronomers. They need to use the restroom or they need a glass of water. They also do that, so just as important. So those are the two ways that you can volunteer at these star parties. How do you do that? First thing is you need to go to the freelist.org and sign up. It's that very bottom one right there. Absolutely must. I communicate all of our upcoming star parties. I give reminders, cancellations, maybe changes. I've been sending out a lot of those recently with the weather. So sign up for that. And yeah, then you'll be good to go. So we were able to make Lionsgate HOA. The weather was great, had an awesome time. However, when I spoke about cancellations, that's pretty much what I've been doing. Our contacts, when I go over the weather forecast, have been like, can we reschedule? So that was Cooley Station's HOA. I was lucky the second Friday star party over at Greco. We were able to make that. I was so happy about that. Which, by the way, just so you know, this month, or this coming month, December, we do not have a second Friday public star party due to the Riparian After Dark. So we'll resume that again in January. And then Ironwood Crossing HOA, nope, clouds. Chandler Gilbert Community College, I was looking forward to that one. That's rescheduled, clouds. So upcoming public star party events, because it's the holiday season, it's slowing down. So we only have 2 coming up. And then again, like I said, no second Friday star party next month. But January and February are pretty booked already. So we'll get you guys going on that. And yeah, if you have any questions about volunteering, please come and see me at the break or after the meeting. And I always have to do a shout out to all of our volunteers, whether you volunteer one time or you're regular. Thank you so much. It is your giving back of your time, your knowledge, your telescope that makes the outreach possible. So thank you. There you go, Steve. Thanks.
Thank you, Alice. All right, special events. We've had some and we've got some. So let's talk about both the past and the future here for just a moment. Yay, success. A few weeks ago, we were able to have our All AZ Star Party this year. So as you know, or may remember, last year we got clouded out, but more importantly, we got winded out. It was very windy out there last year. We had to cancel the event. But this year we had perfectly clear skies pretty much on Friday night. We had a few low-lying clouds to the north on Saturday night, but they never rose much above maybe 10, 15 degrees on the northern horizon. And so we had really great viewing out there for pretty much the entire 2 nights. Just various pictures there. I happen to just like that picture. So that's a nice one. Just you see, we had nice clear skies. That's actually a picture that somebody took of the sky through their scope. We did find the guy we lost out there 2 years ago. He's not looking so good after 2 years out in the desert, but we did find him and he was still hard at work with his binoculars. So anyway, and just various pictures of people just enjoying themselves as we had various times. So it was, we had great observing and it was a very fun social time. I mean, everybody enjoyed themselves, enjoyed talking to everybody else. It was just a wonderful time out there. So anyway, just like I said, various things out there. Also, we have something upcoming here. The American Astronomical Society is having their annual big meeting here in Phoenix in January. And so I was talking to a guy that's kind of helping coordinate some of it, a guy named Rod. And you can see the dates and what they're January 4th through 8th. That's a Sunday through a Thursday is what that is. It's pretty much out kind of towards downtown Phoenix, but here's kind of the deal. Sky and Telescope Magazine this year is sponsoring amateurs so that they can attend for a very reasonable price. So if you're interested in this event, you can have full access to everything for $309 this year if you want to go. And so what that is essentially you have to sign up for the AS membership for $56. It's just a one-time payment for the year. And you sign up as what's called an amateur affiliate. That'll be one of the selections on the page. And then Rod said you had to wait about 24 to 48 hours because it gets manually approved. Yes, you're an amateur. Yes, you can be an amateur affiliate. And then once that goes through 24 to 48 hours later, you can go ahead and sign up for the conference. And the conference is $253. So you add it all up, it's basically $309 for the entire conference. So very reasonable since none of us has to get on an airplane. None of us has to stay at a hotel. It's basically gas money there and back. So if you're interested in something like that, please sign up. That $253 for the registration does go up over time. So as the event gets closer, the price goes up a little bit. So even a few weeks ago, I think it was like $233 or something a few weeks back. So it's gone up $20 already. So if you're interested in doing this, do it sooner rather than later. It'll save you a little bit of cash. So anyway, that's available to you should you want to do that. At the end of every year, we show the budget for the next year. Just it's part of our bylaws and our constitution, just to show you folks where we are and be transparent. So no one's ripping off any funds or whatever else. So this is sort of the projected budget for 2026. I'll just let you work through it. The good news is we're not broke. So that's the bottom line. We're not broke. We have money, so we can still do things next year. This budget, Brooks did a great job. He looked at kind of the general economic situation in the U.S. and he's figuring that maybe next year we won't take in quite as much money because we all have watched our grocery bills and our gas bills and our water bills and our electric bills go up pretty dramatically in this last year. So he's assuming we won't take in as much money, so he's adjusted for that. But we still have a planned surplus of about $1,500 next year. By the way, this is why dues are so important because dues funds a good third of this budget. probably a little bit more than a third. So dues are very important come January when you sign back up. Notice that for Astro events, it's kind of about halfway down in the middle there. We have $8,000 planned this year to do trips and various things like that. So just like this last year, we can have some fun this coming year as well. We'll have at least money to do that. By the way, I just finished writing the president's newsletter article for next month's newsletter, and I recapped everything we did this past year. We had a lot of fun this year. I mean, as I recapped everything we did and all the places we went to and all the things we saw, we were very, very busy and we had a lot of fun, and hopefully we can continue with that for 2026. So anyway, that's just our budget. If you have any questions on anything you see there, you can go ahead and ask, but I'll send you to Brooks because he's the master of the budget back there. So anyway, is that why your granddaughter's here? Or are you training her to be the next treasurer? Oh, okay, all right, just wondered. So anyway, Haley's like, no. So anyway, all right. Elections. So we are at elections for next year. So we have various folks. I'll introduce them here towards the end, but we have various folks that are sort of cycling out of their position, either as a director on the board of directors or as a club officer. So we have some new people coming up here. So we have some people we need to elect tonight. Elections are easy. I say all in favor, you raise your hand, and if it looks like it's majority, I don't even ask if anybody's against. If most of the hands go up in favor of. So anyway, all right. So for vice president, and we have Andrea Mathias. She's kind of sitting back there by James right now. You can stand up if you want there. There you go. There's Andrea. And so anyway, there's Andrea. A little bit of her bio there, and notice how cute her husband is. So anyway, Eric's just a really handsome guy. What can I say? So anyway, all right. So that's Andrea there. Let's just go ahead and do a vote. So everybody who would be okay with having Andrea as our president, please raise your hand. And looks like pretty much what that is everybody else saying, it's not me. So anyway, so you're in, Andrea. Sorry. All right. All right. This is John Dunnigan. He's right over here. So I tried to get a picture with him and Eric as well, but Eric wouldn't go for it. So anyway, you can see a little bit of John's bio there. John's been pretty active. You're fairly new to the club, but 3 years. But he's been very active in a lot of the observing and pick a post, the public events, and all that. Really happy to have John come on as secretary. As before, all in favor, please raise a hand. If it looks like a majority, we'll just go on from there. You're in. So anyway, all right. And Brooks, you should be writing all this down because we're going to need some new badges for these folks. So anyway, they get the Super Duray Gold badges. So anyway, for this. We have some board members. Leo, you can read his bio there. A lot of you know Leo. He's been around a long time. He's not here tonight. He's suffering so down in Atacama, Chile right now, having to tour all those observatories down there and have that wonderful dark sky, thin sky, dry sky astrophotography. So anyway, he's down there right now, but he would like to be a board member. So once again, if you're in favor of Leo, a lot of you know Leo. It looks like Leo's in. So Leo, when you watch the recording of this, or if you're on Zoom right now, you're in. So. Martin, are you here tonight, Martin? Didn't see Martin, so I was looking for him earlier. Okay, so Martin Cuevas, a little bit of his bio there. He is on board for being a board member as well. We've spoken and met a couple, and so he seems to be a pretty good guy. All in favor of having Martin be a director. All right, looks like we're good there. So that was pretty straightforward. And the last one is actually our member presenter tonight, Merill Jencks. Meryl's right there with his hands up. And if he stands up, he might hit the ceiling. He's a tall guy. So anyway, that's Merill. He's coming on as a director on the new board of directors as well. So if we're okay with Merill, go ahead and let's raise our hands. Okay, so notice I did that before your member presentation. So if you totally bomb, you're still a director. Okay, so anyway, all right, so that's it. Now, both the president, me, and the treasurer are at our term limits. So technically, Brooks and I are supposed to ride off into the sunset tonight and turn over the reins for these positions to somebody else. But after about 6 to 8 weeks of work, couldn't find anybody that wanted to do either job. So we have an issue here. So a solution is to rewrite our constitution and bylaws, because technically they say I can't continue and Brooks can't continue. So what we would like to do is actually add that paragraph to the appropriate location of the bylaws. You can go ahead and take a look at that. And if you have to vote to change the constitution and bylaws, it's like adding an amendment to the US Constitution. So anyway, if you're okay with the text of that and allowing people to continue past what we've defined as term limits, once again, raise your hand if you're in favor of doing that. And once again, that's people saying, I don't have to do it. So anyway, well, in that case, then we are going to make that change to the Constitution and bylaws. And if you would like Brooks to remain the treasurer next year, please raise your hands. That was easy peasy. And oh, here goes. Me another year. Stop it. So anyway, stop it. So anyway, I am truly flattered. Thank you. I don't want to make light of that, but it is a lot of work. I was kind of looking forward to the break. So anyway, Brooks, you and I are in. So I guess we're in for another year. So in terms of the folks going out, these are the folks that have been serving us for this past year. So we have our vice president. Why don't you stand up, Amanda? This is our outgoing vice president. She's the one been scheduling our speakers for the last year. Secretary Jeff Foreman right there. He's been doing that. He's running our Zoom for us tonight. Morgan's not, I didn't see Morgan here tonight. Morgan's been really slammed work-wise, so I don't think I saw him. Okay, well, Morgan, we appreciate your efforts. Morgan is still our newsletter editor, so he's still very much involved. He's just doing our newsletter stuff now. Claude in the back against the wall there, so thank you, Claude. And I saw Nathan. Okay, there you go. I was gonna say, I saw you and your dad earlier. So anyway, so my thanks to all these folks for the time they've put in over the last 1 or 2 years in some cases, serving the club, serving you as membership, trying to make a lot of fun things happen. They were involved in a lot of stuff we've done over the last couple of years. So thank you. All right, Merill, you're on. We have our first member presentation. So down arrow or downward or forward, either one. So you're kind of locked in. And you just go down.
There we go. Oh, awesome. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Merill Jencks. I am really new to astronomy and the interest in astrophotography. I actually got a C-Star S50 for Christmas in 2024. So I'm not really even a year into the hobby yet. So I might look really, really basic to a lot of you really, really smart people in here tonight, but I have really been hooked. I use my C-Star almost every single night and really fell in love with it very quickly. And you know, as is I hear quite common in astronomy and astrophotography, kind of quickly wanted something nicer and better and fancier and like higher end, something that would produce even better quality images. Kind of got addicted to, you know, and when I first started, I just wanted to kind of get the whole, you know, messier catalog. But then I you know, I started getting a little more obsessed with the quality of the images and trying to kind of push the limits of the C-Star to get them as good as they could be. And so when the club, I think it was literally my very first meeting, maybe my second, they announced that they were going to be purchasing the Origin Astrograph. I like signed up right away to rent it because I had already been thinking about trying to upgrade my C-Star eventually to something nicer. And so that's kind of what I'm mainly talking about today, is what I perceived as the pros and cons between the two systems. My wife, Christy, who is here, also a member of the club and joins me at a lot of the star parties. And we live in Gilbert with our 8 kids. So Sorry, I guess I went a little bit out of order, but again, with my C-Star, I have done a lot of the, mosaic mode and equatorial modes, and I've learned how to do some post-processing and pix and sight and things like that. I'm not very good at it yet, but, learned a lot in a pretty short period of time. So these are a couple of my favorite images that I've been able to get with my C-Star so far. And I do have prints of a few of them on the gray table over there, so that if afterwards you want to see print versions of these images, you can. So I think the biggest question really for me going into it was, I don't think there's any doubt that the Celestron Astrograph is definitely a higher end. It's faster. It's got, more quality sensors and all of that stuff, but it is also 10 times more expensive. So that was kind of my big question going into it. I wanted to really compare images side by side and decide, is it worth the 10x the price tag? So let me share a few of the pros and cons. The Celestron, super fast. I mean, really, really fast to find the target, focus on the target. Much easier to set up. I mean, you just basically set it outside and say go, and it just starts. With the C-Star, especially if you're using it in equatorial mode, you really have to get it all perfectly aligned and all of that. Not with the Origin. You just set it up out there, and it just goes. Now, a few of the big limits on the Origin for me, at least compared to my experience with the C-Star, the Wi-Fi range is really bad. I mean, it's maybe 10, 20 feet, like whatever the Wi-Fi connector in there is, it doesn't reach very far. So if you're trying to use it in station mode to be able to, connect to like a home Wi-Fi or something like that, so that you could, have it going and keep watching it on your phone from inside the house or something like that. It was really tough for that. And it was always kind of disconnecting and reconnecting, and was having some issues with that. Obviously, it's much bigger and not nearly as portable, so you can't just take it on an airplane or something like that quite as easily. And also, its battery life isn't as good. You really kind of need to keep it plugged in. But my biggest frustration with it was actually the planning mode. So when you would program it to say, okay, I want you to go to this target from 9 to midnight, and then from midnight to 3, the software in the programming, it wouldn't save. I would set the program up ahead of time, go to it in the middle of the day, plan all my targets for the evening, tell it what I wanted the schedule to be, save it, and then I'd come back to it later, and it had messed up the way I had programmed the schedule. I got on a number of Facebook forums, and that was apparently a common issue, that for some reason there's a bit of a software glitch there. But then even when I got the program set right and running, it would it kind of has its recommended viewing time for certain targets. So it would say, okay, 20 minutes on this target, but I didn't want to do 20 minutes. I wanted to do 6 hours or something on the same target, because I wanted to get a ton of subs to really, again, I really wanted to push the limits and get a really high quality image. But it would just change its mind and say, I'm done looking at that target, and move on to the next one, even if I had the program designed differently. So I found a number of people complaining about that. So I don't think it was just user error, although maybe I was doing something wrong, but so it wasn't quite as easy from a software standpoint as the C-Star. And my wife was so annoyed multiple times, like 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, I was getting up and going out there and saying, why is it moving, and trying to fix it and all of that kind of stuff. The other thing that was really tough for me, and this was just a lack of experience and knowledge, was the calibration frames. I didn't really know that much yet about, I had heard of, darks and flats, and, but I hadn't really had experience in using them before, because with the C-Star, you don't need them. So, well, I guess they're built in or something like that. So I messed around with how to get them, but I really don't think I ever perfected the calibration frames. So I think that did have an impact on the quality of some of my images. The C-Star definitely has a community advantage. There's just a lot more users, a lot more people who have one. And so there's a lot more people talking about little hacks and little tips and tricks and YouTube videos on how to process and all of that. There was just a lot more information online about them. So these were some of my favorite captures that I was able to get with the Origin during the 2-week period that I had it for 2 weeks. But the first week it was cloudy almost every night. You'll figure, right? But then on the second week, I was able to use it almost every night, and those are some of my favorite captures. And again, I do have some prints of them over on the table, but here's a couple of side by sides. Obviously I've got the origin on the left and the sea star on the right. The difference is that the origin was able to get its image in probably a fourth the amount of time on the target. And it's also a higher quality image. But also, more importantly, the Origins image was taken from right here in my, Gilbert backyard versus the sea star image I did from really dark skies near Yosemite National Park. So it's not exactly an apples to apples comparison, but you can all obviously see the difference in that one. And then here's, same thing with the Andromeda Galaxy and Eagle Nebula. So just kind of give you an idea of what they both did. So kind of my personal preference was I really liked it. It was really fun. No doubt it's faster, better quality images. But my verdict is if you're patient enough with the sea star, if you're willing to spend a lot more time on a target and set it out there for a long time and be patient and learn some of the post-processing, its images aren't worth 10 times the price tag, in my opinion. So, and then I don't even know what most of that means, but there's some of the specs. So for those of you who know the difference in all the aperture and focal length and that kind of stuff. So, and that is it. If anyone's interested in seeing any more of my images, I post a lot of them on Facebook. So that's it. Anyone have any questions? Yes. Oh, yeah, I forget we have to get a microphone.
We need to make sure people on Zoom can hear the questions.
I tried to go fast so we have time for the game show. That sounds fun.
Okay, Merill. Huge thank you, by the way. He's one of our volunteers for outreach, so appreciate that very much.
Yep.
I think you should mention too, or I'm going to ask, did you do all of your photography with the sea star on the equatorial mount or on its standard alt-as?
I usually like to do equatorial mount because of the ability to capture longer subframes. But for whatever reason, if you're trying to use it in mosaic mode, I have found that it drops a lot more of the frames in mosaic and equatorial. So if I'm trying to do, again, a very large target like Andromeda, for example, then I prefer to use it in Alt-Az mode or Alt-Az or whatever the appropriate Alt-Az. Is that the appropriate pronunciation? Okay, yeah. Any other questions? Oh, looks like we got a few more back here.
Yeah, you talked about the drop frames. Did you notice which one dropped more frames than the other, or was there a significant difference?
Oh yeah, the sea star drops way more frames. Yeah, without a doubt. The Celestron Origin is so fast and so accurate. If you've ever used the sea star, sometimes it'll start imaging a target and it's not quite centered, or there's like these little glitches a lot more. I definitely felt that the Origin, I didn't track it, so I don't have like an exact ratio for you, but it definitely felt that the Origin did not drop very many frames at all compared to the sea star.
What did you use for a wedge under the Origin to get into equatorial mode?
I did not. I'm sorry, to clarify, I did not put the Origin in equatorial mode because I was just renting it from the club, so I didn't want to invest into the mount. But I did think about that. I was like, if I ever rent this again, I think I might see if I can figure out how to get my hands on a wedge so that I could do it in equatorial mode as well. Because I think it allows even longer subframes than the sea star, up to like 120 seconds. So that would have been really cool to experiment with, but I didn't have it.
Your images were beautiful. What exposure were you using for subframes, and what total exposure?
On the Origin, I was using 15 second subframe exposures, and Most of my targets, I tried to have at least a couple of hours worth of data on the, at least for the targets that I displayed. I have a few others that I did that didn't turn out as good. So that, you know, some of them, again, frustrations where I tried to program it to stay on the target for 3 hours, and then it would stay on it for 20 minutes and then skip to the next one. So I had some kind of software glitches with it. It looks like we got one more question back here.
I've got a real basic question about the mosaic mode. Are you talking about looking at Andromeda, which is like 5 or 6 degrees, and you're taking multiple exposures of different areas and then integrating them at a later time? Is that what mosaic mode is?
Yeah, so on the C star, you can, you know, expand the size of the, I'm sure there's a more technical way of saying this. I'm so sorry, you guys, but you can expand the size of the frame that it's going to take, and the, you know, but it's not obviously making the field of view of the camera larger. It's just moving, you know, kind of making a pattern. Reminds me a lot of the, you know, that I'm sure we've all seen the new images that came out a few months ago with the Vera Rubin Observatory in Chile. You know, it's kind of a similar, well, actually, I think Hubble, all of them, you know, do that, you know, kind of image move a little bit, image move a little bit. So yeah, you can set the C star to kind of expand its field of view. Okay, thank you guys very much.
All right, thank you, Merill. I appreciate that. I am going to skip the game show thing tonight because we did the election and budgets and all sorts of other things, and it's already 7:45. And so let's go ahead and we'll come back at 8 o'clock. That gives you 15 minutes to socialize, talk, and all that, and we'll get our main speaker then at 8 o'clock. All right, so I'll see you all in 15 minutes.
Moving on to our featured speaker, Chris Ford is coming to us from the Astronomical Society of the Pacific. He's also on the advisory board up at Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff. Love Lowell. And he was a pioneer of computer graphics. For a long time, he worked at Pixar Animation Studios. So I'm very excited to hear him explain the secret history of Hollywood and astronomy.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you. So evening, it's awesome to be here. So tonight, I want to talk to you about a relationship that has been truly profound and influential in both the way you think about astronomy and also the way you see movies. And yet no one knows anything about it. So this is going to be a bit of a revelation, I hope, for you. So I thought I would give the title of this talk, you know, how Buzz Lightyear added another dimension to our universe, which is absolutely true. But this talk could equally be called just the secret history of astronomy in Hollywood. And it is secret. So really, there's been a revolution over the past 30 years or so, which has completely changed the way you think of astronomical objects and images. Real transformation. And this is a really big subject. I can't touch upon everything, but what I want to really convey to you this evening is how the needs of Hollywood and special effects and animation have been completely entwined with the development of astronomical visualization and simulation. It's a very profound relationship. And all these amazing movie spectacles you see today would not be possible without astronomers actually devising the way that they were made. And I will elaborate on all this very shortly. So to establish some anticipation, if you like, for you, in this talk, you're going to see the most important short film you've never heard of. I would say one of the most important short films in the history of filmmaking. You're going to see common astronomical tropes and cliches way, way too many times. You're going to see how Star Trek shamelessly copied everyone. In fact, everyone copied Star Trek. You're going to see why the entire universe is inside Jodie Foster's eyeball. why bouncing around the surface of Mars really hurts. We're going to look at how to blow up Jupiter and see why the holodeck might be sooner than you think. And we're going to see why AI image generation is a true disruptor that will change everything. And finally, we're going to see how the future of space exploration can be democratized for everyone using the tools and the techniques I'm going to explain tonight. So I'm going to try to squeeze all this into the next 45 minutes. So if you open up an old astronomy book before the 1980s, you'll invariably find wonderful painted illustrations of astronomy scenes and landscapes. By far the greatest and most influential astronomical illustrator was a gentleman called Chesley Bonestell, who essentially invented the look of space and astronomy, certainly during the 1950s and into the 1960s. You may recall, some of you who are older may recognize some of these images. That actually looks like a still from the film Destination Moon, 1950. It's actually not, it's one of his paintings. But these images are so beautiful. And of course, they're painted on canvas. More recently, artists like Ron Miller or Lynette Cook have really created these beautiful static landscapes of what it would be like to be on Io or in Triton, or pick your planetary body. But it was the advent of computer graphics in the 1980s that really opened up a whole new way of visualizing the cosmos. And it fundamentally changed the way movies are made. So today, we can get photorealistic astronomical visualizations with pixels, right? Rather than paint. And what those pixels bring is this horrible word you're going to see up there called verisimilitude, which means the appearance of being real, of being true, as if you were there. Believable. So let's kind of take a look at a recent astronomically themed, so I just jumped ahead a slide here, bear with me, movie, which I'm sure all of you will recognize. How many of you have seen The Martian? Probably most of you here. Okay, Martian was made in 2015. And I'm going to show you what is called a progression reel, which shows how the Martian environment was created. Now, this work was done by the moving picture company, MPC, you'll see the logo, in London, and it was all done inside of a studio. And the whole movie was rendered using the RenderMan photorealistic renderer, which I managed at Pixar, and we licensed to moving picture company to produce the amazing visuals you're going to see here. So I'm just going to let it play. And you'll see how these scenes are constructed. So first of all, the Martian landscape is layered. You'll notice it's not all just done in one go or in camera. Rather, the various layers and the dust devils and the other components of the landscape are all assembled on top of each other, and physics is used to drive the simulation of the particle effects behind the dust devils you see here. Now, the landscape is deliberately exaggerated. The actual surface of Mars is not as rocky as it appears there. I mean, it's rocky, but the vertical elevation isn't quite as high. So there's some artistic license to create a sense of Mars that is, if you like, more familiar to us on Earth, where we do really have these high, rugged mountaintops. You'll notice that various effects, like the reflections in the visor of the astronaut, are all composited or layered into the image that you see there. And they're all constructed and generated from physically accurate principles in lighting. And of course, a lot of physics and astronomy is all about light, right? We like light. It's a real craft to assemble these types of sequences. And you can see the green screen, right, in the background. I'm sure most of you have probably heard of green screens, so you can do all this work in the studio. But the end result is definitely verisimilitude. You know, you have this sense of reality of being there. Now, the dust storm in the background, that's generated by physical effects. So it uses fluid dynamics to actually generate the dust, which of course in real life is nothing like as solid or as thick as it is in the movie. It's a lot less dense. So in reality, you're not going to push a spaceship over in a Martian dust storm. So there's artistic license here. And this whole explosion scene, I think what SpaceX would call a rapidly unscheduled disassembly, i.e. it blew up, is all generated with physics. It's all physical principles behind this. And this is the standard way of producing this type of shot. Now, today, there are some newer methods of doing this. For example, many studios use high-resolution LED screens to act against. But the craftsmanship, I think, is very evident of how a typical high-end movie sequence is produced. So let me step through here. So how do we get to this point? And how does astronomy relate to the way those shots and those sequences are made? Well, to cut to the chase, here's the TLDR version. That's too long, did not read, if you're not into your acronyms. First of all, what do astronomers do? What do physicists do with the data? They collect data, right? And then once they have that data, they analyze it. And of course, they analyze it with rigor, with scientific accuracy. And once they've done that, they produce physically accurate models of usually these days a computer model or a simulation, which once that simulation is complete, can be visualized using data visualization software. So it's very visual, very graphic. And a lot of this is done so you, the public, can understand what it is, you know, these folks are working on. And the whole point is that it's all very logical. It uses a deductive approach or top-down reasoning. So you think, you know, that's how scientists work. But you've seen the movies, and that's kind of like artists and creative people. So let's look at Hollywood. What does Hollywood do? Well, first of all, it's all about story, right? Story, 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 obviously. That's the first requirement. And there's a creative bias. For example, you know, the mountains of Mars are higher, as I said, than they would be in real life, but it's there to serve the story. But you want something that is physically plausible. I didn't say physically accurate. I said physically plausible. It still has to follow rules and logic that make sense. So you have to build simulations and think of the Martian, think of the dust storms, think of the explosion of that habitat. That's a simulation. And you render it photorealistically so it looks real. And from it, you get that sense of verisimilitude, right? That sense of, hey, I'm on Mars, I'm experiencing this, especially if you're on IMAX, for example. And it uses exactly the same approach to produce those images. My team, when I was at Pixar, I would say 50% of the engineers, software engineers behind the technology you see in most movies were actually from astronomy or astrophysics backgrounds, because they had the skills and the insight to be able to reproduce essentially reality inside of a computer and then, you know, adjust it and modify it to make the amazing movies you see. It's not random artistry. It's actually all about thinking about how do things work in the real world. So what was my part in all of this? I actually didn't start my career in astronomy. I actually started as a nerdy software engineer. You can probably tell I came from London. That was 30 years ago. But any of you who have seen Doctor Who, I worked on various title sequences. My first boss invented the Time Lords. And I was responsible for many of the software applications that are used today for creating these kinds of amazing effects, not only in movies, but also in games and in other visualization tools. And I was at Pixar for many years. I'm sure you recognize some of the folks like Steve Jobs over there in the front left, and in the middle is John Lasseter, director of Toy Story. But most importantly for this story is the person on the right in the front, You may not recognize, that's Dr. Ed Catmull. He was one of the inventors, essentially, of much of computer graphics. He invented texture mapping, if any of you are familiar with that term, amongst other things. And I'm hiding back there, by the way. And these, Pixar was an amazing place that pioneered many of these basic ideas and tools about how to produce verisimilitude, the sense of reality. And my team was at one point responsible for more than 70% of all movies worldwide that used CGI to generate special effects. The RenderMan software from Pixar had 21 Academy Awards in a row, just to give you an idea how dominant it was, and still is. More recently, I was at Roblox, which any of you who are under 21 or have got kids have probably heard of. That may be good or bad. And since 2011, I've been both the president, the CEO, and the chief operating officer of the Astronomical Society of the Pacific, which actually is the oldest organization in the United States at a national level, which is dedicated to astronomy education. And that's my day job. But my night job is an astronomer as well. So I've essentially lived, if you like, this secret history of astronomy and Hollywood, and I've had a significant part in it. I moved to Arizona just 5 years ago. I actually live in Sedona, but I also live in Phoenix, and I'm actually the secretary of the Phoenix Astronomy Society. Your buddy's up the road. So good to be here. So what made the secret history of Hollywood and astronomy possible, as I said, is this whole disruptive revolution of computer graphics, something you take for granted today. But it goes back to the 1960s, when really an extraordinary collection of, I should say, exceptionally hairy individuals, it seemed at the time, many of them from the University of Utah, established the most fundamental concepts. A lot of it was DARPA funding this to advance the state of the art in flight simulators. And many of these individuals later became extremely preeminent in related fields. I mean, my own career was influenced by one guy, number 8, Jim Clark, who later founded Silicon Graphics. Ed Catmull at number 5 I've mentioned, but it's Jim Blinn at number 9 that I particularly want to talk about. Jim Blinn essentially kickstarted the secret history of astronomy and Hollywood. Now, it's hard to believe, but this sequence I'm going to show you, which many of you will recognize, is now 46 years old. And yet it was revolutionary for its time and is completely underrated. This, as I said, is one of the most important and consequential short films ever produced in cinematic history. And few people realize it. It was created at JPL in 1979 to visualize the Voyager flypasts of Jupiter and Saturn. And it was the first fully rendered CGI film that entered the public consciousness. Before then, you might have seen wireframe animations in Star Wars or some movies like this, but this was a real groundbreaking movie because it made the public realize that you could get fully lit and rendered scenes that kind of look believable. And this was so powerful a technique that it was actually used in mission planning. So, by the way, a big cliche or trope coming up. We're going to fly through the rings of Saturn. You see that all the time. It was actually used for mission planning because you could use the computer to generate the viewing frustum or the field of view of the camera, so you could point it and know where it's aiming at. So it was actually not just for public exposition of what was happening, but this was also useful to actually visualize how to point the spacecraft in the right direction. Now, of course, filmmakers looking at this got very excited, thinking, well, you know, I can make a movie using these types of techniques. But I'm not exaggerating that from this one sequence emerged an entire revolution in the way movies are made. And I think we should acknowledge how important it is. How many of you have seen this? generally anyone who's over the age of 50. Okay, in the decade or two after these animations, we started to see these techniques being used in movies. For example, in the top left, some of you may recognize the Genesis sequence from the second Star Trek movie, the Wrath of Khan. This was the first use of particle or stochastic effects and fractals to create, the Genesis effect, where this planet is turned into some beautiful paradise. Actually, this was done by, again, my former boss, Ed Catmull and Alvy Ray Smith, when they were working at Lucasfilm in the early 1980s. And then we saw these effects starting to become more sophisticated. In the bottom left, you can see the first use of fluid dynamics, which is, how you simulate gas and water effects, in this movie called 2010, which was made in 1984, which was meant to be a sequel to 2001. You can never really surpass 2001, right? But of course, in this movie, they had to gratuitously blow up Jupiter, as we can see here. So immediately you can see that with this technology, people, directors and creative individuals are starting to do amazing things. But also these particle effects started to appear in astronomical visualizations for planetaria, for the news and public education. And a lot of it used the cinematic language of the movies. This is very invisible to most folks, but the way the camera moves, the way it tells a story is very cinematic. None of this was possible when you only had painted images of astronomical scenes with pixels. Here you could actually get a sense of what a black hole really would look like if it was ripping gas off the surface of a partner or companion star. Now, the black hole visualization you see here, which was 1995, doesn't quite align with the way we think of black holes today. I'm going to get onto that a bit later. We've updated the way we think of these. So this is very powerful in terms of a technique. And I've lost count of how many astronomy documentaries are called Other Worlds. It's like you take like 5 or 6 words, right? Mix them all up and you get like 15 different programs and titles. But here's an example from Santa Barbara Studios in 1990, which I actually used to work underneath in Santa Barbara, that used the Dynamation software from my team to create this effect of a solar flare, right, coming off the surface of the sun. And this looks great. But of course, someone in Hollywood saw this. And if you think that and this following sequence of a comet leaving a dust trail behind it looks kind of familiar, then you'll see that it was shamelessly copied by Star Trek in the title sequence of Voyager, if any of you are Trekkies. Pretty much the same animation, we just threw a starship into it. Likewise, down in the bottom right, again, many of you who are Trekkies might recognize the opening title sequence of Deep Space Nine, but both of those actually originated in animations that were produced for public education in theaters and in planetaria and other astronomical education events. So the visual demands of Star Trek really did have a lot of influence in astronomical visualization, as it did modern culture, or was it the other way around? You can never quite tell. Okay. All right, so the visual experience that really tied it all together. So I'm kind of moving forwards in time, coming closer to where we are today in 2025, is an opening sequence for the movie Contact. How many people have seen Contact? Again, a lot of you, right? This sequence has a very powerful effect in the beginning, where you have this continuous pullout from the Earth until we get to, sorry, I'm just checking it. Let me just play it. Here we go. So we're pulling out, and we're going to head out into the wider universe. Now, first of all, actually, this is actually a pretty tricky thing to do, definitely at this time in the history of this technology. You have to continue changing the level of detail as you keep pulling out to make it effective. But this sequence contains every trope and cliche you can think of. Mars has a face on it. Remember the face on Mars? Some of you remember that? It used to be a thing. And then, of course, you go flying past the asteroid belt, and it's all full of rocks, which, of course, is nothing like as dense. We go past Jupiter, and the imagery and the iconography of Jupiter very much reflects the images of the time, which came from the Galileo and obviously earlier, the Voyager spacecraft. Here we go flying through the rings of Saturn. They can't resist that. We just keep pulling out, and as we do so, the levels of detail keep adjusting. This sequence was produced by Sony Pictures Imageworks, who were in LA at the time, again, using the RenderMan software from my team. And as we keep pulling out, you can see eventually we go through, what's the Oort cloud. We keep going, and we're passing Vega. And then what was the iconic astronomical image of the 1990s? What was the first image you thought of? Well, of course, it was the Pillars of Creation, the Hubble image of said name. So, of course, they had to pull through that image, as we actually see here. Now, I'm not quite sure if you actually lined everything up, it would actually be as you see here. However, remember, as I said earlier, there's a creative bias. The aim here is storytelling, but to give it verisimilitude, to make it feel real, to make it feel believable. But even more importantly, this is establishing what the public expects to see. I mean, and you all know that, you look through a telescope and you see a fuzzy, faint blob. Nothing is in color unless you're using an origin, or you're, doing live stacking of images using astrophotography or electronically assisted photography. But this has very much set the expectation of what people really want to see. So we keep pulling out, and we're kind of heading into galactic space now, and pulling for all of these different, kind of well-known objects, which I'm sure many of you realize. We keep on going. This is quite a journey. It's like a powers of 10, right? Where you keep increasing by 10. But eventually you realize that the whole of reality, the whole of everything you know, everyone you've loved, everyone who's been in your life is just a gleam in Jodie Foster's eyeball. Which is... Okay, so we've been talking about movies, but related to movies and astronomy visualization, there's also space mission visualization. I've got a particularly good example to show you here, because NASA would commission these animations to show often fairly complex things, like the landing sequence, in this case, of the Opportunity Martian lander way back. And a favorite of mine is how it lands into Gusev crater, which is where it currently is, or its carcass is now, on Mars. And on the left, you can see the original animation that was produced before the mission was even launched. On the right, after it had landed and been rolling around Mars for a few years, the animation was redone using the telemetry data and the photographic data of Mars to make it super believable and real, again, to give it verisimilitude. I'm going to play them both side by side so you can see the difference. One is the vision of what they thought it would look like when it was landing. And on the right, you're going to see actually how it would have looked were you actually riding down with it. So let's just play them both. So this has one of the most contrived and crazy landing mechanisms ever, as you'll see. So it's entering the Martian atmosphere. Now remember, telemetry data is driving the one on the right here. And actually that is Gusev crater, which is the landing spot on Mars, which doesn't look anything like the made-up version on the left-hand side. You can see the actual crater here. And you can see the whole deployment mechanism of the spacecraft as it comes in to actually land. And then we get to the funkiest part of this, which of course is, many of you are familiar with this, it's released and bounces around the surface surrounded by all these airbags. Here we go. Now, the surface of Mars on the right-hand side is taken from orbital imagery. Even the rocks you see here are actually fairly accurate because we could see the bounce spots or the disturbance in the dust of the Martian soil or regolith as it bounced to Mars. And we could use a technique known as photogrammetry to reconstruct the terrain and the rocks. So if you were literally following this, this is what you would see as opportunity eventually arrived on the surface of the planet. And you can see that the timings are slightly off. And that's because the one on the right is driven by telemetry. However, what's really interesting is how close it is to the one on the left, which was, as I said, done before the spacecraft was even launched. So it's a pretty amazing sequence, I feel. And the other point I want to make is how cinematic it is. Again, it's invisible to you, but how the language of movie making, camera motion, camera angles is used to make it something that feels comfortable and familiar with you. Now, I'm going to hasten to add that every animation, whether it is done for NASA or anyone else, has a blooper reel, right? Things go wrong. So here's the Curiosity rover, right? This is the rover that was launched in 2011. And I'm going to show you the blooper reel, which Dan Mouse, who created the animation, did for me, where Curiosity is, you know, kind of drilling into rocks, looking for interesting samples to analyze. Mars is painful. So you see, by, kind of past 15, 20 years ago, all the tools are in place to use cinematic storytelling to tell stories about astronomy using techniques of simulation that were developed both for astronomical use, but also for movie use. Now, of course, this technology began to work its way into planetaria. And as I'm sure pretty much all of you have been to a planetaria recently, you don't have that old style optical Zeiss projector, which was a characteristic of old style planetariums. Planetarium moved to having projectors, which would project maybe 7 to 11 images onto the dome and stitch them all together. And most recently, large LED screens, like the one that's opened up in Phoenix at the Science Museum very recently. So I'd like to play you a beautiful sequence that shows again the convergence of astronomy simulation and filmmaking techniques to show the creation of the moon. Now, I'm sure many of you know that the current hypothesis about how the moon was formed is sometimes called the Big Splat, when an object about the size of Mars hit the Earth around about 4.5 billion years ago, blew out a whole ton of debris, which essentially coalesced and then formed the moon. So the animation I'm showing you here was designed to show that in a planetarium. This was first introduced at the Hayden Planetarium in New York. Now, it looks a bit distorted because remember, we're taking something that was designed for a dome and unwrapping it to be on a flat image. So if everything looks a bit weird, that's why. So imagine you're underneath this, right? You're kind of looking up at it. And some of you may have seen this. So here we have that object. I think it's called, is it Thera or something? Which hits the moon and wham. Okay, so this whole animation was based on an actual physical simulation done by 2 astronomers. And I'll name them. It was Dr. Robin Canup and it was a Dr. Kakubu. And this was one of the tools that was used to verify the physics of how the moon would have behaved and would have been formed. So that data was then used to drive the rendered version here, where they put in all the rocks and all the heat and the effects and the glowing debris, as you see here, to actually show how the moon was formed. And it's very, again, cinematic, right? And it's very spectacular, by the way, if you're actually sitting under this. Has anyone seen this in a planetarium? It's a treat. And eventually, all of the rocks that you see here and the debris, which have been blasted off the surface of the Earth about 4.5 billion years ago, coalesce into the moon, which is one reason, by the way, that the moon's crust has a lot of chemical similarities to the crust of the Earth, because that's where it came from. And if you're kind of wondering, how long did this take? How long did it take for the moon to form, as we can see here, as all the rocks aggregate together until eventually they combine and form into the moon we know today? 1 month. It took 1 month for the moon to be formed from the Earth, which is incredible. But that's what the physics of the simulation proved from, a physics point of view. So, and of course, now the moon is a lot further away from the Earth because it's moving out very, very slowly. Okay. Now, just for fun, while I was at Pixar, many of the astronomy and visualization tropes and conventions that directors find irresistible made their way into our animated feature film, WALL-E. I'm sure many of you have seen our friend here. Again, you see many of the tropes that we've been talking about, the surface of the sun, we have the flares. We don't go flying through the rings of Saturn, but we get pretty close. As you can see here, there's some other techniques which are being used here. I mean, this very beautiful lighting, which you see here, and a method called volume rendering, which is a technique used to create like gaseous clouds and nebulae. So in a second, you'll see the spaceship which WALL-E is on. Yeah, see this cloud here, which is like backlit from the stars behind it? That's a very specific type of rendering. The reality is that if you were to go to a nebula like, M42, the Orion Nebula, or this one, and sit in the middle of it, you wouldn't see a thing. Because the density is what, maybe one kind of molecule per cubic yard or meter. It's only because all of those molecules are stacked up along the line of sight that we actually see them. So again, this is interesting how your perception of what a nebula looks like, and you probably think it's like, being inside a smoke-filled room, is actually nothing like the reality. But that image will never be unlearned. That's what you expect. It's always going to be like that. Now, a recent example, this is interesting, of Hollywood and astronomy is establishing what we now think of a black hole looks like. Now, of course, we now actually have an image of a black hole in the center of our galaxy. Here it is. Some of you may have seen this image. And here are some earlier attempts to simulate and visualize, the bending of space-time around a black hole to show you what it would be like up close and personal. But this actually, to get a truly realistic visualization of what a black hole looks like, requires a very special type of simulation. Now, many of you may have seen this. The origin of this image was from a movie called Interstellar. Have any of you seen this movie? Yeah, I'm sure many of you have. So this was done by Double Negative in London, a visual effects company, but they worked with an extremely renowned physicist, Kip Thorne, to actually create a gravitational renderer that would actually use Einstein's equations in general relativity to actually predict how light would bend around an object of extreme mass and gravitational force, such as a black hole. So this actually, again, is, as far as we know, is as realistic a realization of what a black hole would be like if we were really up close and front, because the simulation is physically true and physically accurate, and it drives the visuals to, just make it very understandable and explainable. Let's take a look at a section from the movie itself, because there's more about this I'd like to talk about. So I just picked a sequence here from Interstellar. Here again, you see the black hole. Now, you might think that much of what you're seeing with the actors in their spaceship, in their spacesuits and in the spaceship is all done in a set. Some of it is, but the reflections on the helmet, much of the interior is actually all created inside a computer. And the subtle aspect of what you're looking at here is that the lighting is so good that everything feels seamless, whether you're inside the spaceship, whether you're outside of it, you feel that you're in the same universe, right? It doesn't feel like it's posted on or there's crude matte lines or something around it. And, you know, if we just go forwards a little bit and we take a look at the sequence as we go actually into the, or near the surface of the black hole, I'll just let it run a little bit. Again, you can see it very atmospherically portrayed through the window here. So this is quite a long sequence. Here we go. You see, you get these beautiful visualizations of what it would be like to be very near the event horizon and to fly over the accretion disk. Look at this. You know, this all comes from, as I said, writing a gravitational renderer. So, you know, in software, you can essentially simulate anything in the universe, including black holes. And this would be one heck of a scary ride. So we're getting close to today, 2025 now. And you can see from this selection of astronomy, Hollywood, and space mission visuals, how each kind of riffed off each other in establishing the look of astronomical objects and events that you don't even question. You think this is what it looks like. There are many, many more examples I could have picked, but I wanted to show you these particular examples. But let's now kind of look forwards a little bit. Where's all this leading? Because we can now produce, you know, images and effects that are so real, it's hard to tell them apart from reality. I have a trained eye. I find it really hard to tell what's real and what isn't, especially in some of the more recent movies that you will see. So the chart I'm putting up on the screen here is something called the S-curve of technology development. And the notion here is that a technology, and we're going to pick visualization as an example, usually starts off very slow, so like the 1970s, 1980s, and then there's a period when it accelerates really quickly until it hits physical and economic limits. Probably the best example is aviation, right? You know, before World War II, everyone was flying around in biplanes and planes made of canvas. Then within like 10, 20 years, flying around in supersonic jets. You know, that was the huge takeoff. But then eventually reached the limits of physics. And, you know, a passenger plane in 1960 looks pretty much like one does today, just because, you know, we don't travel in supersonic airliners because it's too expensive. And we're, you know, and there are various physical limitations in doing so. So this notion of an S-curve is really important to what we're talking about here and where we are. Because if we take a look at where we are at the moment, it's way down there. We're pretty low down on the, but there is so much more to be done in producing truly believable and immersive visual experiences in astronomy that will make you feel that you are there. So above all, it's about the simulation of light, right? Everything in astronomy, in physics, is about light in some way, or the way light behaves over the curvature of space and time. And like any physics lesson, you can break everything we see about light into what's known as the render equation. I'm going to test you on this, by the way, after we're finished. But this is essentially the E equals mc squared, if you like, of everything I've shown you in visualization. In fact, there's one even more scary for volume rendering, which is used to create you know, kind of effects in nebulae. But until recently, there have been 3 iron laws that have really stopped progression going up that S-curve in a way that we think it will do in the future. The first of these is Moore's law. Many of you know this. That is, you know, CPUs generally double in their data density, you know, every 18 months or some value like that. There's Blinn's law. You don't know about this one, but this is named after Jim Blinn, the creator of the Voyager animation, that says that the time to render these images will always remain the same. No matter how complicated the image, no matter how sophisticated the algorithm, they take the same time. And that's actually always been true. The original Toy Story movie, you know, at 24 frames a second, each image took about 6 hours to render. Move forwards to a more recent Pixar movie like, you know, Finding Dory or Coco or something. They all took about 6 to 9 hours. Obviously, those images were far more complicated, but, you know, essentially, the more you throw at it, the more creative people and directors want you to get out of it. So the time always remains constant. I'm going to name a law pompously after myself called Four's law, which is that directors always want to change things. That's the other problem. If you can generate things almost infinitely quickly, someone's going to say, yes, but make a different version, make it greener, make it slightly greener, or something like that. So what's going to change that? What's going to accelerate us up that S-curve? Well, now we have GPUs. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that term. I won't go into all the gruesome details I've listed here. Graphical processing units, NVIDIA, of course, is now the most valuable company in the world because it produces GPUs that are as equally important in AI. But GPUs are just as important here to generate real-time images. And much of this has been driven by the games industry. The games industry, in fact, in parallel, has pushed much of the more recent developments in computer graphics. So the animation, what you see here, is generated in real time. You don't have to wait 6 hours for these beautiful images. They're generated at rate of 25 or 30 frames per second. So, and you get all the physical effects because these engines don't only render images, they contain physics engines that again simulate real world effects of the sort we've been looking at earlier, and real lighting effects as such. So if we combine everything together, I mean, I'm sure many of you have experimented with AI or AI image and video generation, where you can just take a simple text string and you can just create images and videos, which I think is always the most impressive thing. The video you see here, I literally created in like 1 minute. It's just you can go find any program on or AI program online, and you can generate yourself an instant documentary, not only with the visuals, but the narrator, with the sound, with the music, everything. I mean, this is a true disruption. This is actually going to change completely the way these types of images are creating. And this is terrifying Hollywood. One reason why there was a writer's strike a few years back was because AI essentially is going to make obsolete many roles and many areas of storytelling. And there are whole categories of jobs that are probably going to vanish because of AI. However, it's happened before, right? People are not painting astronomical images in the way they did back in 1970 or 1960. Walt Disney isn't animating movies using traditional hand-drawn and painted cells. Computers are used to produce this. So this is fairly normal in the development of technology. But what this is doing, when we combine it all together, is really producing a profound acceleration up that S-curve. So if we combine physically based lighting, where we can make things look completely real, with physical simulation, so we can simulate how things move according to physical accuracy, and in this case, how astronomical objects would behave physically. We have real-time rendering using GPUs, and we have the immersive technologies of big LED screens, planetaria, domes, VR, all of these things. And we tie it together with AI, which can essentially stitch this all together instantly. Then we're getting to a new level of ability to immerse ourselves in things that have true verisimilitude, astronomical scenes that feel truly real. That will put us further up the curve here. And when we're there, and I think it will happen, it's happening now, to be honest, but we'll really enjoy its fruits over the next 5 to 10 years. Essentially, we'll be at a stage where we have a holodeck or a holodeck type experience. Again, I'm going to go back to Star Trek, which has always been a constant in this story. There's no physical reason why we couldn't have this type of immersive experience. And, as they say, what happens in the holodeck stays in the holodeck. And I think the most profound aspect of this is that it will democratize astronomy without going into whole new areas. At my age, I'm sure many of you, I feel a bit cheated. I feel I should be living on the moon by now, and it never happened, damn it. Instead, what happened was that all the work and the energy, a lot of it went into computers and into simulation and everything we've actually discussed. Sometimes there's been this notion that maybe we're living inside some kind of simulation. That's actually a theory. I put the matrix image here on purpose. But I think the true reality is that as we can reconstruct astronomical scenes and vistas, what it would be like to walk on Io or Triton or Titan, and we could put them into a holodeck or an immersive environment, even a planetarium dome, we can experience what trained astronauts are currently only able to experience. And then we can just turn it off and go and have a good dinner without all that nasty dust and other cosmic rays and stuff that gives you cancer. And I think the democratization of experiencing astronomical scenes is actually the true outcome of everything I've actually shown you. That's the future that lies ahead of us. That's why the secret history of astronomy and Hollywood is so important, because the two merge together. And we're going to build this future where all of us will experience these things in person. So I hope what I've illustrated is how productive this interplay has been, and in the development of simulating reality based on physical principles. And I hope it's been entertaining and revealing. So you may have a few questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Questions? Any questions for Chris?
So,
in your personal opinion, you mentioned game engines currently at the moment. Do you think that if between movies and video games, are we seeing a more respect and more literal representation of astronomy in games or movies in present day times?
in movies, I mean, they're somewhat different media. I would say movies is more, but not all movies you see are respectful of astronomical themes. You can see a Marvel superhero movie or the Guardians of the Galaxy or something set in space. I wouldn't say that's particularly respectful, but it does convey, again, the image of what the public expects. And I think that's one of the challenges in astronomy education and outreach, is that the public kind of is being trained to expect something that, as we know, we can't see with our real eyes. But through simulation, we can get into the same place. Games is a somewhat different area, but it's game technology that has really driven the real-time aspects of this at a high level now. So the old rendering of images taking hours is going away, thankfully. So.
I'm impressed by the fact that there are physics simulation engines behind these graphical images. Is that why scenes of rivers and ocean waves have become so much more realistic?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a whole niche, if you like, of this type of simulation, usually based around fluid dynamics and CFD codes, which are, of course, used in engineering and in other science investigation, applications. But yeah, there was a movie in like 1999 called The Perfect Storm. I don't know if any remember that, which was a good example of really sophisticated use of particle simulations to convey waves, and everything you saw there was done inside a computer, and it's only got better since. So yeah. There are engineers and software engineers who focus on nothing less or nothing more rather than producing that type of effect. Yeah, I mean, fire, explosions, all of those are based on physical dynamics. So.
You talked about software engineers and doing all of this work, and then you talk about AI. And of course, a lot of those software engineers will be out of a job when AI
exactly.
Gets stronger and stronger, and people learn more about how to use it. That's going to have an impact in our general society, because a lot of people are doing things that AI can do quicker and faster when it gets trained. And the impact of that is going to be interesting on society, and see how we deal with a lot of people who are out of jobs.
Yeah, I mean, this is the biggest revolution in technology since the internet. And sometimes when you're living in it, you don't realize how quickly it is moving around you. But, I'm sure many of you use applications like ChatGPT. Where was that like 2 years ago? No one ever heard of it. Now it's becoming almost embedded as a tool to, create new content or even just write resumes or business plans, whatever. So just like the internet revolutionized the way people interact, and especially with social media, we're going to see the same thing in AI in unpredictable ways. And yes, nothing I've discussed here is outside of the broader implications of this impact on society. You're correct. Just a little side note here. There are roughly around about 125,000 astronomy graduates, or at least the 125,000 students taking astronomy graduate courses, let me put it that way, in the US every year. Now, of course, not all of those become professional astronomers, only a minute fraction do. Where do all the rest go? Well, obviously, there are those who become astronomers. Some go into the movie and the games business, as I mentioned, because that was the focus of my teams. A big chunk, for some odd reason, go into financial simulation and financial modeling. But again, these are all deductive, top-down reasoning skills that are very applicable and transferable. And of course, now AI is a natural place for those graduates to go. So astronomy and physics as part of the broader category of STEM is so important and so transferable to a good career. Any of you who are young and are interested in getting into any of this, you couldn't have a better gateway. So.
I've used RenderMan like when I was a kid. I started working on it and did a lot of 3D animation stuff way back. Thank you.
Thank you.
And yeah, obviously I read all the credits and Ed Catmull's name came up in my head too. Thank you. Having said that, where do you see things like RenderMan has changed obviously, and I saw and now GPU and AI. Where do you see the merging of AI, RenderMan, and things like that in, I would say, in science and also the art aspect of astrophotography?
Yeah, so one thing I didn't touch upon here, if the path to photorealistic reality, if the path to absolute reality was linear, we would have cracked this several decades ago. And of course it's not, it's like an asymptotic curve. The first 90% is easy. The next 5% is a lot harder. Then the next few percent is harder and harder still. So you never can get to absolute perfection without vast amounts of effort being put into it. Which is really the answer to your question. At the high end of filmmaking, it's all about the last few percent. And it's that last few percent that takes a lot of time. And there's always going to be a certain level of craftsmanship and skill, if you like, needed to attain that. But when I was at Pixar and the RenderMan team, something we would discuss often is, when is it good enough? Where's that line when it's good enough? It doesn't have to be perfect when it's good enough. And usually, until recently, good enough took a lot of time to get to. Now it's real time. That last few percent, maybe trained professionals would notice, but it's really directors just really wanting to put more and more creative effort into something that is very hard to actually see. So AI is combined with rendering is already good enough. And that's why we're seeing, good visuals. And admittedly, AI visuals have a certain look, but that's going to change because, as you all know, I think, large computing centers will be established or being invested in to handle AI at a scale way beyond computing has been to date. And that in its turn is going to increase the fidelity and the believability and the verisimilitude, to use that word again, of everything you see. I mean, that's a big roundabout answer to your question, but it's not stopping anytime soon.
So today you sort of outlined the story of moving from like artist interpretations and sort of adding in that data and moving towards more, obviously, that's a very hard word to say, verisimilitude. But also sort of some additional accuracy with physics models and the different methods of simulation. How do you think that we can sort of deal with the fact that when we're incorporating AI, it doesn't really understand what it's doing in terms of visualization? It's mostly like paint by numbering.
Well, I mean, there's no computer phrase, right? Garbage in, garbage out. I mean, AI is only as good as the way it's trained or the data it can find. So I agree. that is an issue. And actually, that's something I'm working on at the moment in the Astronomical Society of the Pacific, is how can we verify the authenticity of AI-generated science content? Because there's a huge amount of stuff, like you go onto YouTube, what's this phrase, AI slop? Just random stuff generated that could be meaningless. And there needs to be a way of allowing you, the public, to know what you're looking at actually has some sense of reality. It's a problem. It's not a solved problem at all, but one certainly I'm very aware of.
Okay, that wraps us up. Thank you so much, Chris. That was so exciting. Just kidding.
We have one online question, so I'll take care of that right now. So it says, in the future, how could someone tell whether they're looking at an actual astronomical image or video versus something was generated with AI or whatever?
It's going to be really hard. Just think of the movie example. You look at a modern movie, all movies, doesn't have to be a science fiction movie with aliens where it's obvious it's computer generated. It could be, a thriller or romantic movie set in New England or something. Much of that will be computer generated or layered because, often you can't just land in town and shoot a scene because people are there and you get in the way of the traffic and all of that. My point is that already you do not know whether what you see in a movie is real or not. I can't tell because the lighting and the simulation is so accurate, it's so good, it's fully believable. It's going to be the same for the astronomy. And that comes back to the point I was mentioning to the gentleman earlier. How can we verify the authenticity of that material? It's a real open question. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, these are, again, it's like the internet when it started, right? I mean, there are huge open questions. We don't know how it's going to roll out. There'll be good and there'll be bad. And we have to balance the two.
All right, I think that wraps up tonight. Thank you very much, Chris. We appreciate you joining us here tonight.